Alright, gang. Audio recording. You guys could come forward like a rank or two. That would be awesome. I brushed my teeth today and I showered, so yeah. Again, I'm not doing that just to make it weird or burn time or precious time on the clock, but one of our many techniques that we're going to need to get comfortable with is helping folks understand what kind of a spatial, but also what kind of social arrangement we have for any given interpretive thing. We manage that actively, plan for it, so that you can be the most effective as possible. Waste people's time as little as possible, hopefully, like we're not wasting people's time and time. But also to protect the physical apparatus by which you are delivering interp. In case of staff interp, it's going to be your vocal flaps, your voice flaps. And that's going to be a pretty important thing to not be shouting when you don't have to. Alright, cool, welcome back. Do we have any announcements for the good of the cause in terms of student organizations, events, stuff happening around campus? Yet. Yes.
I don't know if people are aware, but over in Pulliam Hall, they have I'm trying to remember the name, but it's a little center. You can go in and they have a ton of outdoor educational materials. Right now they have no exhibit on soils and all of them. But if you go in there, it's Steve, it starts with Stefan, is it Steve?
Garrity.
Yeah, Garrity, that guy. And he's super friendly. Go talk to him. Talk your ear off about anything that I've been in for a while. And he has volunteer opportunities coming out, so.
I think that's how you're supposed to. Steve Garrity is a super cool guy. Anybody with an email address in Mammoth is cool. So, yeah. Steve, for many years, worked over at Touch of Nature, which is a world eminent level environmental and historic and outdoor recreation facility recognized by the UN. We were talking about in our last class here in wilderness management. He knows a thing or a million about interpretation, but also running a camp and environmental education and a lot of the adjacent things to what we talk about in this class. He's a good person to know if you're interested in any of this stuff. Get to know him. He is a super friendly guy, and I'm sure he'll love nothing more than to help explore with you some more of this stuff outside of the classroom, so it's not just me saying it. Cool? All right. Good deal. Welcome. Come on in. So, it's been a minute since we last chatted, right? Snowpocalypse 2026. Hashtag never forget. We left our conversation talking about themes with an exercise to take home to look at a couple of your topics, and for each of those topics, develop a couple, 3 theme statements or questions or exclamations or whatever that might serve as one of many entry points to interpreting that topic, for helping random people coming to your national park, or coming to your Touch of Nature summer camp, or coming to your whatever science museum over in St. Louis. We've been at the Science Center over there. All right, lots of interpretation happening there. And the theme is just the entry point for that. It's the shingle that you can hang out on the sort of sidewalk of attention, metaphorically speaking, and folks can see that one opening statement and think, that sounds like it's worth the next 20 minutes of my curiosity, versus sitting down and just scrolling on my phone in the Touch of Nature camp, or St. Louis Science Center, or the zoo, or Forest Park, or Morton Arboretum, whatever. So this is our chance. This is our shot. And field research on human attention in natural environments like busy heavily peopled natural environments like a mountain summit with an interpretive trail right on the top, or at a visitor center, or a children's museum, wherever. The research indicates that you have 2 to 3 seconds while somebody decides if the juice, metaphorically, is worth the squeeze. That is, if the topic that you are interpreting is interesting enough or provocative enough because of its theme statement, folks can make an informed choice to give you more than 2 to 3 seconds of their time. And most of us, we assume about a 6th grade reading level, which is about right for the United States, unfortunately. 2 to 3 seconds is about 1 sentence. So this is pretty important. We're spending now multiple class sessions just on this 1 sentence phase of the whole thing. Now today we're going to start to explore all of the rest of it and locate theme statements within a larger structured outline. Not a script that you got to memorize, because that's boring and it's hard, but a very flexible, very nimble outline that you can curate, include or disclude elements on the fly as you are interpreting. So, how'd the assignment go? Did anybody sort of look at your topics and kind of hit a brick wall? It's okay if you did. Everybody was able to write a couple of sentences? Well then, pitter patter, as they say in Letterkenny, Ontario. Let's get at it. Anybody have a theme statement they'd like to roll out before the class? Just like last week, this is going to be a totally cooperative effort. We're going to help each other edit these, because somebody's going to see something that you missed. It doesn't cost them a lot of effort or mental energy. It helps you out in a big way for a blind spot that any of us might have. So, who's got a sentence for us?
After my interpretation, I asked you to understand negative impacts of feeding wildlife.
Negative impacts of feeding wildlife. That's a good topic. Alright. Cool. What bad happens if we feed wildlife, y'all? Question for everybody. Say again? Bears in camp. But I mean, that's half the entertainment value, right? Well, it's a funny joke for us here in a classroom, but if you're a scout at Philmont, the busiest, most attended camp in the world in human history, having a bear in camp is not funny at all. So it sounds like there's some consequence to this topic. You know? Okay. Any other problems with feeding wildlife?
Great dependencies.
Create dependency. That's right. Metallica once sang before you guys were born. You feed it once, and now it stays. Now it stays. So Jeremy, I'm just kidding. We're gonna get into song lyrics here in a bit too. So those are interesting. Awesome. All right, that's a good topic. What's a theme statement or question that you could write out of that? Full sentence, punctuation, all that stuff. Question for everybody. How could we broach the topic of feeding wildlife with the general audience? We've got Joe the plumber. We've got Kaylee, the 2 PhD and JD lawyer, federal judge. We got everybody in between. How can we open up a topic like this? consequences. There are stories. I've been charged by bears twice, and I've encountered a lot of bears over the course of my life and research. And all but one of them, all but the grizzly bear, were because previous people in that bear's habitat, the bear's home, had fed bears and put my life in danger, and I didn't like that. So, some serious consequences here. How can we introduce this to people? Let's all sort of, as a class, come up with maybe some theme statements. Yeah.
Kind of what I have to go off.
Okay.
Kind of the reason this was the one I chose is that a lot of the times I work for DuPage County Forest Preserve, and so a lot of the time when the problems become when people are feeding the deer, a lot of the time they just become way too friendly. Eventually, they do get put down. Once it starts to become a problem, so showing people that what they perceive as a kindness, good act leads to the detriment of the animal. Is something that's
Kindness leads to animal harm. Okay. That is closer to a theme statement. It's not fully baked yet. So back to our rules for this class. It's got to evoke. It's got to be a complete sentence, which this technically is. It's got a subject, it's got a verb. That's enough. We need punctuation. We need to express it using attributional language, so some kind of a you or me or us or them or our. So we understand how we relate to what's being said. And it's got to be expressed in a way that is in terms of the reader, not the wildlife biologist or the park ranger or whatever else. Okay, yeah.
Think again. Here's how to keep bears out of your sleeping bag.
Cute and cuddly. It's two sentences, but that's okay. We'll allow it. Here's how. What's the second part of it? Here's how.
Here's how to keep bears out of your sleeping bag.
Here's how to keep bears out of your sleeping bag. What punctuation mark goes at the end of the sentence on this one? All right. Period it is. Okay. We have 2 to 3 seconds to hook people, get their attention, for them to make what's called a fraction of selection decision. In cognitive behavioral psychology research, that is one way to describe the perceived effort of getting into the content versus what am I going to get out of it? What's the reward? Effort to reward. Okay? Cute and cuddly, here's how to keep bears out of your sleeping bag. Oh, think again. I apologize. All right. Cute and cuddly. Think again. All right. I'm going to write this in a certain way, and it may not be correct. We've got 2 to 3 seconds for people to read these 2 lines, process them meaningfully, so it can't be too much of a mental load, or a too subtle mental load. Is there anything we can take out? Sometimes good design is subtractive, especially in game design later in our semester. We put in that thought. Is there a single word, maybe a phrase that we could rework in any way to say the same thing, but more efficiently? As the word count goes up, but the content does not, you start losing people. So what's a shorter way, if there is? Yeah.
So maybe drop here's, just how to keep bears out of your sleeping bag, just to start.
Why use lot word when few? Okay, good. What else? Let's keep going. Building momentum here. Cute and cuddly? Think again. How to keep bears out of your sleeping bag.
It would be kind of taking out a lot, but I think you could say like cute and cuddly, not when they're in your camp.
Okay, so, like drop the of your sleeping bag? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just say cute and cuddly, not when they're in your camp.
Okay. Get rid of the whole prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases identify locations or spatial relationships or conceptual relationships out of your sleeping bag. All right. Cute and cuddly? Think again. How to keep bears out. That was like 4 or 5 words we just cut out of there.
You could change out to away.
How to keep bears away. Okay? Could we cut out even more?
You just make it keep bears away.
Oh, shoot.
Keep cuddling, think again. Keep bears away. That sounds kind of commanding.
It does. Is that wrong?
I don't know. I mean, you don't want them there. Maybe that's the provoking part.
Yes, exactly. One of our fundamental rules is we have to express a perspective on this. Whatever the factoid is, it has to be moving us in a certain direction, looking onto that factoid in a certain way. There's a value judgment baked into this language here. If we're getting a direct 3-word command, maybe with a exclamation point at the end, that's more than just a factoid. This is a, hey, you have to do this. And we're using our limited word budget to focus you on this. There are lots of important things to understand about wherever the bears are. In the forest preserve north, or family's farmland, or down on the Shawnee or the wilderness areas, wildlife refuge, or any of the state parks down here. There's a lot of important and interesting and exciting topics. This one outranks others. Why, how, we write it. Cool. Now, we can commit, unfortunately. This is not a quantitative, dry mathematical equation or system. We can cut out too much. We have removed the attribution language of the your sleeping bag. This is pretty open-ended and conceptual. It's not tied to a place. And importantly, it's not expressed in relation to the specific visitor. So, we don't slavishly go for the fewest number of words as the only thing. We are optimizing as proper SAF accredited SIU forestry seniors do optimizing for multiple competing values. It needs to be clear what the perspective is. This is crystal clear. Cute and cuddly, think again, keep bears away. You're also needing to optimize for people to understand that it's not an abstract command for poachers. It is maybe something like keep bears out of your sleeping bag. That's a very, very much more intimate and urgent and scary mental image. Yeah. It's not my sleeping bag. And in fact, that's exactly what some food-attracted bears do. At places like Philmont, one claw to open up the side of the tent where there wasn't a door before. A second claw to drag the kid-sized and shaped pre-wrapped burrito out, the kids screaming in terror, and then one or a couple of claws to open up and unwrap the burrito and look for the forgotten Snickers wrapper that's shoved in the kid's pocket from a day and a half ago, but that still smells enough for the bear to navigate hundreds of square miles of basically desert subalpine terrain at Philmont to try and find those excitotoxically flavored, synthetically flavored, and synthetically calorie-dense foods. A lot more than they're going to get by using the dry arroyos, the dry stream washes, or berries, and so forth. Okay? So, how can we get some attributional language in there? How can we make it feel urgent and important to that specific reader as they're standing there at the trailhead looking at this sign, or whatever?
Imagery.
Like,
Just like the stuff that we're talking about, like wrappers, like showing like where to dispose them.
images are going to be a powerful tool later on in our outline, in our content, in the body of the intern. This is the introduction for the thesis statement of it, our cold open for writing TV shows, streaming episodes. Okay. Cute and cuddly? Think again. Keeping bears away from you. Still got an exclamation point. The word count, still less than a dozen. For 3 sentences, that's amazing. You guys are pretty good at this. Okay. So, are there any other ways that we could word this that don't use this sort of structure and we're not doing this, like a totally fresh approach, but same idea? Same urgency, same importance, same impact, same requirements. Is there another way that we could do this? This is correct, fully correct. This accomplishes everything that we needed to, but it's not the only answer. But there are a million different ways we could open up with a million different sentences like this, but not this. Let's do another one. Same topic. Cute and cuddly, think again. Keeping bears away from you. Their ideas.
This one would be a little bit wordy, but it could be something like, storing your food is the difference between life and death in bear country. Something like that. Something that you say, you know, where you're near bears or whatever, but like, well, I'm gonna die, I better do that.
Difference between life and death in bear country. second to look at that one. I'll transpose this one down here a little bit. Storing your food safely is the difference between life and death in bear country. That's a good start, guys. That's checking most of our boxes right out the gate. Nice work. But there's always something to tighten up, something to revise, something to make a little bit clearer. One easy way, one trick that professional interpreters use when they're coming up with these is to identify when we're using any of those verbs off of our passive verb, our statement of dry fact, boring verbs. Take the two halves of the sentence where it's broken in half by that passive voice verb, reversing the order, take it out of passive voice, stick it in an active verb, and generally you can say the same exact idea with a couple fewer words. Let's see if that works here. Okay. Life and death hang in the balance. Store food safe. Store your food safe from bears. One of the key approaches to storing your food safely in the backcountry away from bears, hanging it. Anybody ever slung a bear bag before? Alright. Does anybody have no idea what bear bagging is? It's a little bit frustrating the first couple times you do it. If you've never swung a weighted bag for urban tree work, to set your lifelines and stuff like that, or your tension lines on a tricky felling, or trying to hang a sil nylon food sack, 15 feet up off the ground and 15 feet away from a trunk in a tree. It can be pretty frustrating until you really get the hang of it. So, life or death, hang in the balance. Store your food safe from bears. And then, the rest of the sign or the pamphlet or the little video on repeat at the backcountry desk where you get your backcountry permit for bear country hiking. In the visitor center, it's a video on repeat, just showing you how to bag it. Okay, so we see what I've done there, and it takes it from a passive verb, is, to hang and store. Active storytelling verb, active command verb. Hang is telling a story. Okay? This is happening in the visitor's eye or mind's eye as they read this. Something is hanging in the balance. There's a process. How do we get to a place of something hanging in the balance of life and death? That sounds pretty serious. And then a clear command, store your food safe from bears. We got plenty of space for all the details and the technical approaches to doing that and maybe the reasoning why. But gotta hook people quickly with that theme. Alright? Cool. Not super exciting exciting, but super important. Everybody kind of getting this approach so far? All right. If you have your three, the sets of theme statements from last Wednesday for homework, pass those forward, or if you have it typed up, you can email it in. That's fine too. Always works. Awesome. So, this is kind of the process, and it always starts with this every time. We can't get around crafting an airtight, bomb-proof, other metaphors, theme statement. We can pick and choose a lot of other stuff around it, but everything else is picked and chosen based on the angle that you are setting up in the theme. Okay? So, if you are a part to whole kind of person, like you want to see the zoomed in detailed picture first and then zoom out to the rest of the thing, write your theme statement first. If you are a whole to part person, go ahead and work through, develop sort of the first draft of your interpretive outline, again, which we'll go through here in a second. Do that, kind of get an idea of, okay, so I know I want to talk about this particular topic. I got some ideas for the content of it, but I'm not sure exactly how I want to open it up. It's entirely valid as well to write your theme statement as the very last thing that you do, because giving your brain a lot of time to marinate on what are some of the different perspectives on this. How are some different ways that I could take people through this stuff? And I really like number 3 out of my list of 8 ideas on that. I'm going to take idea 3, boil that down into a really good theme statement, and then ideas 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are going to be just sort of the content arranged under that. All right? Cool. So let's move on to the outline. Cool. So the balance of class for today is to get one step past the theme and start thinking about what might be some interesting ways, some really fun for you as the person taking us through this stuff, but also maybe fun or challenging or whatever for your participants, audiences, publics, plural. Okay? So let's go through what the sort of the basic prototype outline for Interp looks like. Anchoring it on the theme statement, and then elaborating, unpacking, looking at from different perspectives through each of the thematic points or chunks of content that are sort of tied together by that theme. Okay? So, we're going to have 5 major parts. We're going to informally call part 0, so to speak. Now, I know that pre-gaming is something different to college students. But for the purposes of interpretation, pre-game is all of the prep. It's whatever you need to do that day. You have done the work of developing the content. You have a couple of different themes to kick things off. You can pick which one you like. You have a bunch of content to different modes or ways of expressing stuff. Some might be interactive, some might be more didactic or passive or whatever. This is preparing you mentally, physically, whatever. This is preparing the space, making sure it's safe to take visitors of varying mobility, capabilities, or restrictions on that hike, that cave tour, or boat tour, whatever it is. Okay. Make sure everything is good to go. That when something goes wrong, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, we are prepared for it. Then we have like every paper you've ever written. We got the introduction, part of which is the theme. The most important of which is the theme. The most visible of which is the theme. Okay. So the introduction is going to be introducing yourself to the group. It's going to be collecting either actively or reflectively some kind of an introduction so you understand who is with you today. A bunch of school kids? Is it a bunch of octogenarians in their 9th decade? Is it somebody in between? Is it a whole bunch of families? Is it a school group? Is it a bunch of college students? Is it somebody else? You need to know that stuff because that's going to be pretty important for figuring out, okay, this game, not inappropriate for a bunch of 80-year-olds. This slideshow, not super effective for a bunch of 3rd graders. Right? And we're including and excluding or discluding various chunks of content in there. So, I'm going to refer to these the chunks of content interchangeably as thematic points. Each thematic point is one chunk of content. It's one 5-minute stop on your interpretive hike. It's one interactive activity or game. It's one page in the Junior Ranger guidebook that talks about its own little subtopic underneath your topic and theme. Okay? And of course, we come to a graceful landing. You gotta land the plane. And tie back to the theme. Ask folks if it's appropriate, what did you learn today? Or maybe how might you think differently at the end of this thing versus before you came in? We're talking about stuff that's really important that actually matters. Not just like relaying information, not just filling time. And hopefully we hear some interesting answers on that. One of the coolest experiences you can have as an interpreter, one of the most rewarding things is taking folks through a difficult, a challenging, a socially or morally or ethically loaded topic, something that's not easy or cheap to talk about. Like the Holocaust, for example. Have you guys ever been to the Holocaust Museum in DC? Whew, man, that will age you like a decade in an afternoon. It's wild. But one of the coolest experiences you can have as an interpreter is connecting with people in a real way. Not just being like a public speaker blasting content at people. Nothing parasocial like a YouTuber or streamer or a Twitch person. But like actually meaningfully getting beyond all the walls that we put up, all of our distractions and all that stuff, and really connecting with somebody over a hard topic. And they respond to you in this conclusion section of, you got me thinking about this person that is in my life. And I see something of what you're talking about in my dynamic with them. Good, bad, lovely. Or when you were talking about how this particular forest ecosystem works like a beehive. I grew up on a farm and we kept apiaries for all the farms around us, and so I was in my feelings when you were talking about the beehive. Even though you weren't really talking about a beehive, it was just a metaphor for how this ecosystem works. It's like, oh yeah, I got through to that one. Like they were really present, they were thinking about it, they were here for it. Okay. And then after that is the post game. military, this might be referred to as after action. It's a chance for you to disengage, to go to the bathroom, to recharge your battery if you spend a lot of energy to get in front of people and talk to people. So after I'm done teaching each day for a couple of hours of stretch, I'll go into my office and I'll turn off the lights and I won't do anything for a little while. Because that's what I need to do to recharge my battery so that I don't like bite somebody's head off because I'm exhausted mentally. Maybe not outwardly or visibly or physically, but just like I'm spent, you know? It's a lot of work. For some of us, it feels like very intense work to get up in front of a group of people and stuff like that. Okay? So the after action is your chance to catch your breath, but also to ask some important questions. How did I do? What did I do well? What would I like to change or improve or just modify for next time to keep it fresh? Not that I did it badly, but I'm kind of sick of talking about X in Y kind of a way. Maybe I'll swap in a game instead of that like chat or whatever the different modality is. Okay? So 5-part outline. Pre-game, intro, including the theme. Your content or thematic points. Okay. Freeman Tilden, that old dead guy who wrote the Bible on interpretation as a first-generation profession about 80 years ago. Okay. Suggested something on the order of not overwhelming people but not leaving them too thirsty for more. Something on the order of 5 to 7 thematic points. There's a reason that a lot of junior ranger guidebooks are between 15 and 20 pages long. If you figure 2 pages per thematic point, and like a couple of pages for front matter and back matter, like the introduction and index, not that a junior ranger guidebook would have an index, but it's back matter in a book. This is about right. So if you have 5 to 7, if you have time and space and energy for 5 to 7, then let's have, how many would you like to have to draw on to fill up those 5 to 7 slots? What seems like a good number to have available mentally to you and prepared so that you can pick your favorite 5 for that particular group's dynamic? Their age, their energy, their investment, focus, whatever, mobility limitations. What seems like a good number of thematic points to just kind of have in your back pocket? You can pick 5 as you go. Anybody? No wrong answers.
8 to 10, 12,
Okay.
depending on the roadblock.
If 5 to 7 done, 8 to 12 available. For a professional interpreter working in a place like Yosemite National Park, leading a hike, a guided hike, from a visitor center to some green spaces not right next to the visitor center, getting out into the valley just a little bit, but on foot, so not too far. You might have as many as 30 or 40 different things that they could say. 30 or 40 different stops along the way, so that in a single day of, let's say, 6 guided hikes, in your 8-hour shift, you have 6 1-hour guided hikes, plus the pre-game and after action around each of those for 8 hours instead of 6 of actual engagement. You could do all 6 of those, and none of them have anything, or none of them have any overlap with the others in terms of the actual thematic points that you took that one group of folks on. So hike 1 gets topics 1 through 6, or thematic points 1 through 6. Hike number 2 gets thematic points or chunks of content 7 through 12, and so on and so forth. And some of them get 8, some of them get 4, some of them get 5 or 6 or 7. And so you have a lot of rounds in the magazine. It's not a clip, it's in the magazine, at least in modern use, so that it's fresh for you. Okay? And like, Park, 30 or 40 or 50, really? Really, really? Yeah. How many of you guys are into Pokemon? Or Digimon? Or any of the Gotta Catch 'em alls? Okay. How many of those are there? Hundreds of them. Right? Some 100 at this point. Pushing 1,000 just in the Pokemon line, I believe. So, you know, let's say your interpretive hike is about Pokemon, just like some bizarre nerd national park has a visitor center full of anime, and one of your guided hikes is about Pokemon. If you're always talking about Pikachu every single hike, that's not gonna be fun for you anymore. And the passion that you have for Pokemon that has you conversant enough, very familiar enough with 40 or 50 of them, gets sapped away because you're just talking about fucking Pikachu again. And sharing that same story about Pikachu's voice actor. And it's just like, okay, this is the grind. It doesn't have to be that way. And if you're talking about stuff that you are genuinely passionate about, 30 to 50 different interesting things about that, that's not a big lift for you. This is something you're passionate about, right? You already know those 30 to 50 things. It's just a question of, you know, thinking about, you know, what's the over-under on talking about evolutions of these 5 versus the evolution of the ecosystems that these other 7 are a part of, and how does that relate to where you're standing right now on this hike, etc. Okay? So, don't worry, in this class, I'm never gonna like lock you guys in the room and say nobody gets out until you have a list of 50 different ways to talk about the idea captured by your theme. I'm just stating that if we're doing this right, we're talking about things that matter to us and that we understand why they can matter to lots of other people, and that passion drives big amounts of content. Okay, cool, very cool. So, in our pregame, in your notes, go ahead and pull out a fresh sheet of paper. Title that sheet of paper, Interpretive Outline. And on the first line, we'll start with pregame. And pregame is usually anywhere from like 3 to 15 minutes of very structured, very intentional time. So pregame, parentheses, 3 to 15 minutes. In pregame. First, we want to prepare the materials, whatever stuff that we need to use. In station-based interpretation, where you're like planted at a spot and people are just like wandering by, like have you ever been to St. Louis Zoo or Shedd Aquarium, stuff like that? There's a bunch of fixed emplacement spots because you can't move where the animal enclosures or the aquatic enclosures are. And they might have interpretive staff like stationed there, station interpretation. So you want to make sure that that place is ready to go. Or whatever physical materials, it's very, very common to see interpreters with a backpack full of stuff, exhibits, things that the people can touch and hold, pass around, or interact with, materials for the games. Games are full of things like tokens, whatever the tokens might be, whether they're chess pieces, or if you hit your wallet, Warhammer 40K Titan models for thousands of dollars, or like games have physical objects called tokens that you manipulate, and all that. We'll get into games later. Prepare the place or space. So before you take folks on an interpretive hike, you gotta walk that whole hike. Make sure there are no downed trees from the night before. Make sure there are no downed power lines, no dead or rabid animals like right there on the trail that you're about to bring a bunch of people unfamiliar with this local ecosystem into. Okay. Lastly, and just as importantly, you prep yourself. So our materials, good to go. We packed and checked our first aid kits to make sure that everything is in there. We have prepared the space, hiked the trail first thing in the morning to make sure there's no rock fall or wind through trees, no widowmakers, nothing like that. And right before we step out in front of people, take a minute to gather ourselves. And whatever kind of day you're having, it's not anybody else's fault. So if you got a flat this morning, or had a pretty intense fellowship with a significant other or partner, or a couple of your many foster animals are sick and stressing you out, or cat planted her penis on your face to wake you up this morning at 4:30 because she was hungry. So it was late in chat, or pet owners that we've seen different things. Anyway, whatever that is, it's not that you're stuffing it down and you'll deal with it later. It's that you need to be your full and authentic self with people who are trusting you with their time and their safety as the interpretive guide. So you've got to be fully present. So it's not stuffing that stuff down, it's acknowledging it, saying, man, I am having a shitty morning. I need to do whatever I need to do right now to gather my thoughts and be ready to not be a shitty interpreter, even though I'm having a shitty morning. Cool? So that's a very personal thing, and each of you gets to decide exactly what that looks like. Preparing materials, preparing the place and the space, safety checks, electricity checks, for places that have electronics, making sure like Windows isn't installing an update for this looping video that you need to be playing, or whatever. This prepare self step can be just one big deep breath, slow breath in and out as you are walking out. If that's all you have time for, if that's all you need. Other days, it's I need a cold glass of water. For famous operatic tenor Luciano Pavarotti, who was not super excited about performing in front of audiences, and he was a world-renowned opera singer. Take a shot of whiskey each time. I'm not advocating that you drink on the job. There are real problems associated with that, especially more in something like interpretation where you're working directly with people and you are responsible for their safety, versus standing up on a stage and, being the guy or the lady that's singing for 3 or 4 hours. Okay? Have you guys ever seen the movie Schindler's List? Schindler's List? It's an older movie. It's about Nazi concentration camps and extermination of 6 million Jews and other politically undesirable people in the eyes of the Third Reich. But the music for that movie is famous, and it is led by concert string player, so violin, viola, guy named Isaac Perlman. I think that's how you spell his name. I mean, this guy's bigger than SZA, bigger than Michael Jackson. Like, multiple generations understand that this is one of the best violin performers in history. The way that he prepares himself, or prepared himself back in the 80s and 90s and so forth, was to pray. Wasn't to look over his sheet music. He put in the hours, all by heart, virtuoso level violinist. He pray. Because for him, getting out in front of people and producing a performance at a world level is not an expression of technical and professional expertise and practice. It's a spiritual experience for somebody at that level. Does that make sense? So, whether or not you believe in the flying spaghetti monster or the Abrahamic God or, you know, the, I don't know, Greek pantheon, whatever, ask yourself, what do I need to be hunted or, as we learned on summer camp this past summer, locked in, instead of just put the fries in the bag. Okay? You are spending people's irrecoverable time every time you do interpretation with them. So, whatever that looks like, moment of quiet, tall glass of ice water, high protein snack, whatever your thing is, pray. Do that. And budget time for it, because the interp is not going to be as good otherwise. This is a real requirement for this class. Not to pray specifically, but to do something to prep yourself. Alright? So, these are the main things. And materials, like we'll get into some super boring details like safety kit, interp items, program eval items. If you've ever filled out a 1 or 2 question little postcard size thing at a national park on interpretation or your hike or whatever, those are called gift res. And those scores are like how satisfied were you with this line. That's program evaluation. It's trying to figure out how is this actually going from the visitor's perspective versus how do we think it's going. Okay? And these, not a big deal. All right. Then the actual introduction. So, our introduction is going to start with not the theme, but a call to attention. We refer to this as the hook. Call to attention could be lots of different things. It's just something unusual, a little bit unexpected, to snap people out of looking at their screens while they're walking and stepping on people. Help people understand that there's something, anything more going on in this time and spot than just I need to find bathrooms, or I need to just get my tickets for this thing, right? It'll be somebody not in costume but in period authentic clothing, demonstrating tools. Everybody been to Colonial Williamsburg out east? Popular field trip thing for elementary school kids east of Mississippi. Colonial Williamsburg is a living history interpretation site where you see people in 1700s era clothing doing things like the guy who worked as the armorer, the musket maker, basically disassembled and reassembled the same musket a couple of times a day for like 35 years. So that outfit is a hook. You're walking around Colonial Williamsburg with your corn dog in one hand and your sunburn on your face, and you're like, well, now what? I wonder where the bathroom is. And then you see a guy in like stockings. 1700s, men wore stockings and the women were glad of it. I'm kidding. And he's taking apart a gun, and it's like, what is going on here? That's the hook. Just the fact of his presence, or her presence. And it is some kind of stimulus. In an example we'll see here at some point, a world-class interpreter named Shelton Johnson at Yosemite National Park starts his interpretive hike. He gathers people, gathers attention by playing a wooden flute, a recorder, which was a period-accurate musical instrument that the post-Civil War cavalryman that he is portraying could have in his saddlebag to just sort of spend time in camp before the era of the Black Mirror smartphone. Okay? So he just starts playing that. Like, he doesn't say a word, but he's in period accurate clothing, walks outside of the visitor center, and just starts playing a song. And people are walking by, and they just stop to listen for a sec. Most of them don't know that he's about to lead people on a hike. And so the hook is kind of the invitation. Hey, I'm about to do something here, and you're welcome to join if you want to. So, there's the hook. There's the introduce self. There is the set expectations. Specifically including safety considerations. And now that we are in front of people, from the moment we start the introduction, the second after we finish prepping self, now we need to give people a very clear sense of, right now we're in the introduction part, and I'm about to start a guided hike. We're not there yet, and soon we will be on the guided hike. So now that I'm done with the introduction, let's transition to hiking. People have no idea what you're on about, no idea what to expect. So you have to very carefully and visibly and audibly do transition. So we're going to outro from our intro section, and then we're going to from the outro of the introduction, which is going to, excuse me, I'm gonna sneak our theme in there, sorry about that. That's pretty important. After we introduce the theme, we say it. We say that one sentence. We ask that one question, whatever it is. Then we transition using an outro, signaling the end of the introduction, and we segue from that outro into the first thematic point. We introduce the thematic point before we actually do the first thematic point. And then whatever that is, a page or two in the Junior Ranger guidebook, some, printed activity, or the first stop on the guided hike, or the first big room inside the cave, or what have you. Or maybe the first thematic point is outside the cave. And our outro from thematic point 1 and intro to thematic point 2 is getting to our first big room inside the cave, but we've already started the conversation. So, intro, content, whatever the thing is you're going to talk about or do or experience, show, encounter, content via the modality, and then outro. And that's gonna set us up for transitioning into thematic point 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then, oh, well, I don't feel like doing 6, so maybe I'll just kind of skip to 8 for today. We'll talk about the last ones instead of score. Yeah, that sounds like more fun. Okay, 8 it is. Alright, intro that. Talk about that particular Pokemon. Outro out of that. And then eventually you loop back to where you started. You never take folks on a hike and be like, well, okay, that's the end of the hike. Good luck. You know, you take them back in a loop to where you started, back to their cars, back to the bathroom. And as you are traveling back, or once you get to there, or what have you, then we are out of our thematic points. And our conclusion has a couple of very specific things to do, like the intro. There's not a lot of content in the intro, just the theme. There's not a lot of content in the conclusion, just the theme. So this is that short time that we have. Typically, conclusion section is usually pretty short, 3 to 5 minutes. You restate the theme. Check in with people. How are we doing? What did you guys think about this? Did this sort of stir up anything in you? I'd love to hear some sense of what you are getting out of this, or what surprised you. You can ask open-ended questions like that, mostly appropriate in the conclusion. The conclusion is often where you tackle questions that folks have that came up along the way. If you don't have time or flexibility to answer those questions as they come up, which is usually more desirable, but this is your chance to say, does anybody have any questions for me before we finish up today? And then you wait in the uncomfortable silence of them looking at you and you looking at them, because there are social norms, right? Most people won't immediately start saying, well, I have a question. It's more like a, I know the moment I speak up, somebody else is going to say a question, and then I'm going to look stupid. Nobody's saying anything, so maybe I should, what do you think? Oh, somebody else will say. Right? It takes 10, 15, 20 seconds for that conversation to play out in everybody's head. They're all doing it. Okay? And that's okay. You want questions. That's a good thing. One of the most exciting questions you can get as an interpreter is, I want to do what you do. How do I do what you're doing? How do I get there? That's somebody who is so present that they're looking at changing the course of their professional lives. The kid says this. My wife, for example, wanted to be a veterinarian since about the age of 5. She's a veterinarian. The folks come to it much later. And it's a really cool thing for their veterinarian mentors to hear that person say, I think I want to be a veterinarian because of you. So when somebody asks you that question, how do I get a park ranger job here? It's a big compliment to you. You didn't scare them off. You didn't freak them out. Yeah? So we'll hold space for questions. And then the last thing we do in front of people in the conclusion is we break up with the participants, break up with the audience. We give them, especially the folks who don't necessarily automatically parse all nonverbal social signals easily, give them a clear sense of, this is the end, now it is over, I'm going away. And you do it very politely, very kindly, and in fact, you don't generally go away immediately. It's like, okay, now we're done, thank God. Instead, it's, okay, we're done. And I'm available if you have a cool story to tell that maybe I don't know about this topic. I would love to learn more about it because I'm super passionate about this. Okay? So, that's super important. Break up with the audience, signal the end of things, but you're not done. Still have somebody wandering up to you and sharing a meaningful story out of their life with their perspective on what you guys interpreted today. And then after that we have all of the wrap-up stuff. So the Go recharge your battery however you need to. Get another glass of water, another high protein snack. Stretch. Do a sun salutation to limber up your body and your mind again. Whatever that looks like for you. Okay. And we're going to be sort of filling in the blanks on this all the rest of the semester. There are a million different ways we can do it through games and hikes and activities and other interactive staff stuff and all of the non-staff formats like we saw on the first day of class. Things like card games, Junior Ranger guidebooks, where you can earn badges. That's cool. I showed you one of the worst reviewed comic books in the human experience. The last 800,000 years of modern hominids brought us through this. We survived somehow. It's fine. If you like Captain Planet or Swamp Thing, it's fine. If you ever saw the movie Fern Belly, not exactly like that at all. But anyway, this makes sense? This is our outline, alright? This is the template. This is the rule set that we're going to use for everything other than the theme. And the theme figures in here twice, in the intro and the conclusion. It's that important. We start with that and we end with it. It's the first bit of content and the very last bit of content in the intro and conclusion respectively. Cool. Any questions about the interpretive outline? Okay. With a little bit of simple math, we can put the amount of time that we give to each of the remaining things, right? So pregame, usually 5 to 15 minutes, whatever that is, 3 to 15 minutes. The intro is usually, unless there's a more serious safety requirement like we'll see at Mammoth Cave, the intro is usually a couple of minutes as well. At Mammoth Cave, the intro is like half an hour or more because they tell you what they're going to tell you about safety requirements, how many steps you're going to do and stuff like that at Mammoth Cave. And then they tell you how many steps you're going to do at Mammoth Cave and how long, how many hours it is if you have a heart attack or something like that to get you out. And then they recap what they told you about safety. They make sure that you can't miss it because it's that important, obviously. And then all of the rest of the time, minus a couple of minutes for your conclusion, is more or less evenly divided across your thematic points. So if you have a game, for example, that you need a couple minutes to explain the rules and get it all sort of set up with everybody, and then a minute to ask for volunteers, and then a couple of minutes to play the first round of the game, and then kind of debrief with folks. Okay, is everybody sort of tracking with how this game works? All right, let's try round 2. But this time, let's have this other extra rule. There's this other hazard you have to avoid or whatever that's relevant to the game and relevant to the theme and topic. So you can spend 15 minutes on that one thematic point by borrowing time from other thematic points that are much shorter. 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes each. Cool. Alright, so you don't have to invent any of this stuff. This is all a complete template. And I'll post a digital version on our course website that has a little bit more detail, some more reminders of some of the finer points. But this is the thing, okay? So, our assignment for Monday is to take a crack at picking any one of your fully ready to go, fully baked themes and see if you can just daydream in one full outline of, let's say, let's start easy. 3 thematic points. Intro, conclusion, which you don't really have to write anything, just copy paste the theme into the intro, conclusion, all the rest is done. And come on Monday with one first draft, super janky, it's fine. Outline. Cool. We'll go from there. Alright. I'm a little bit over time, so I gotta let you go. I apologize for that. I am around for questions, even though class is over. See what I did there? Yeah? Included? Yeah? Alright. What's up? most of our class sessions recorded. So I need to record those, but
Do I need anything else before starting? Is there anything that I need to sign from there?
Yeah, we'll have like the regular waivers and stuff like that.
I just want to make sure you guys know what I need to do.
No, we're
I was gonna ask about that. I had originally put down on my calendar as February 27th. First.
Yeah, everyone from Cardinals.
Well, I'll do the sign of the class.
So it's,
So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll go over Monday, so we'll have a job. We'll go camp in the boot camp site, right next to the visitor center in Main Cave entrance.
So it is February
Yeah.
27th?
Yeah,
Okay.
February 27th.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was gonna ask, if we'll go
Yeah.
to different ones. So,
Yeah,
okay.
it automatically sort of keeps reposting stuff from older years, so I gotta go back and
Okay.
update that. Good catch.
there've been some other teachers who have been having that issue as well. I wonder if it's something wrong with the site. But, thank you.
Alright.
I will be looking for your email.
Cool. Nice to meet you, Carson.